My name is Laura Decker. I work with a company called Prolific Earth Sciences, and we make the microbiometer, which is an in-field test for soil microbes. And Trevor asked me to come give a quick little talk about the importance of microbes and the role, a little bit more scientific based, of microbes in the soil. I think sometimes when we talk to people, we sort of assume that everyone is on the same page with microbes. And understands fully what they do and why they want them. So this is just a quick overview of some of the important parts of the soil microbe cycle. Next slide. So in conventional, what I call conventional agriculture, which has been agriculture used sort of traditionally in the United States, which uses perhaps some irrigation, perhaps some chemical fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. And what we've been learning as the soil starts to degrade naturally is a lot of that is because the chemicals, NPK, that we have been feeding the crops, which have been incredibly effective, essentially in increasing yield, which has been a wonderful thing. What it has done is taken away the role of the microbes in the soil. So plants and microbes have a symbiotic relationship. Microbes feed plants and plants feed microbes. But plants, like all of us, are a little bit lazy. And if you do put down chemical fertilizers, it's much more readily available to the plants. So instead of for them bartering with the microbes and working that relationship, they will just eat up the chemical fertilizers that have been put down. So really the effect of the extensive use of chemical fertilizers and frankly pesticides and herbicides is that the microbes have not been growing the way they used to, or in a system that's sort of untouched by agriculture. Next slide. A healthy soil is deeply reliant on the microbial community. And I can't go into all of these, but I'll do a couple of them today. One is that microbes give and provide immunity to pathogens to plants. This is a presentation in itself, how microbes in plants communicate the existence of pathogens and how microbes feed plants immune chemicals to help them with that. Plant also gets the required mineral and nutrients from microbes that mine it from the soil or create it and trade it with the plant. Microbes also digest the litter. So as the roots of plants that are left in the soil start to decompose, those microbes will eat those and decompose them and turn them into soil organic carbon, which we'll talk about later as an important part of the food stores for microbes and plants in the soil. Microbes also feed information to plants about the soil conditions, okay? And more importantly, I think we'll talk about this a lot more, is that microbes help build soil structure. We know soil structure is incredibly important for a lot of different reasons. It helps prevent erosion. It increases the water holding capacity of soil. It makes plants and soil resistant to drought. And it also increases the oxygenation in soil, erosion. And then also, and I'm not going to hit on it now because it's sort of controversial and a little hard, but sequestering carbon is one of the things that that microbes can help do. And I certainly hope this is certainly, there we go, something that can be talked about later, that when we talk about making farming more profitable, right, we talk about reducing the input costs. And also, hopefully we will at some point be talking about farmers, not just farming crops, but farming carbon to make farming more lucrative. Next slide. So this is just a picture of a control plant. You can see the roots down there that says, here's a control plant as the first one. And then you can see the root structure if the plant is fed chemical, phosphate, nitrogen, ammonium, and potassium. And you can see that really what happens is the plant is like, oh, I have all the food I need. I don't need microbes to help me. So the roots are how the microbes and the plant communicate. And so there's a decreased root structure. Decreased root structure then creates essentially a vicious cycle. If there's fewer root structure, Roots also break up soil, aerate it, do all that good stuff. But also roots decompose in the soil and make soil organic carbon, which we'll talk about later. Next slide. One of the things to understand about microbial communities is that they're very extensive and they layer. A microbe has very, very little DNA. So each microbe can only make 1 or 2 compounds, okay? So, and what we like to say is that if you have this is a Petri dish. I don't know if anyone has kids in school, but they always do this, right? You take a clean Petri dish and you put your hand on it. The first thing that'll happen is 1 microbe will start to grow and it'll look like a certain color. And then as that microbe grows, it starts creating the enzyme, the chemical in the food that another microbe needs. So that microbe will perhaps have a spore there, but until it gets woken up by another microbe, it can't thrive. So there's a chain reaction. Bacteria A can't grow until bacteria have provided the food. So as your microbial community gets healthier, it gets more diverse and bigger. So it's not like you can just in one day get the microbial community back up. You have to build it layer by layer. So just as the plants and the microbes barter micronutrients and chemicals, so do microbes, okay? So microbes, you need to have a diversity of microbes. Now there are, I don't even know if millions is the right word to use, but many, many, many kinds of microbes. We know almost nothing about them. We know that some are good and some are bad, but we don't quite know. And the other thing we don't quite know is how do they vary across the globe and in different areas, right? So that's one area that's getting kind of exciting right now. But what we do know is the bigger your microbial population becomes, the more diverse it comes. And the more diverse it is, the more resilient it is and the healthier it is. So this is just sort of a primer on why you want a large microbial community, right? Not just because you want a lot of the same microbes, but you want lots of different microbes to provide micronutrients and different immune responses to your plant. Next slide. Soil structure. I think we talked a little bit about this. This is kind of cool. I think you can look at soil and know if it has good soil structure or not, right? You don't need to run any fancy test. But the way microbes build soil structure is that microbes are sort of running around in the soil and they get eaten by other microbes, by nematodes, by all kinds of things. It's sort of a tough world underground, these microbes. So they attach themselves to soil particles by secreting a sticky substance called EPS, okay? And what that does is make a little cave around them, right? That cave can hold oxygen and water and other microbes and soil debris. When the microbes die, right, their bodies become soil carbon, but the sticky substance remains, okay, creating soil aggregates and soil carbon from their dead bodies in it. Next. So here's a little life cycle of a soil aggregate. You can see on the top left, they start forming, right? A microbe will start secreting the substance. It'll bind to soil particles. It'll maybe have some roots going through it or some old debris. Maybe other microbes will join them. Then it'll be stabilized, right? Will be this nice little home. It's got a pocket for a little bit of oxygen, a little bit of water. And that's one of the things why soil structure is so important for mitigating drought risk, because you can hold a lot more water if you have structure. And then they disintegrate. It's a very, very fast cycle. Some microbes reproduce every 15 minutes or so. So there's a lot happening down there. When they disintegrate, the sticky substance is still there. But again, the bodies of those microbes become food for new microbes. So again, it's a virtuous cycle. As soil structure gets to get built, it becomes easier to build it with all those microbes. Next slide. Microbial food security. So our carbon stores. So there's a lot of talk about soil organic carbon, both fresh and soluble. Fresh, I think about as sort of the food in your fridge, right? You can just grab it and eat it. And stable is like the stuff in your freezer, right? You have to defrost it and cook it, okay? So soil microbes make soil organic matter from plant material that's being broken down, and it becomes sort of fresh, and then it goes down, it becomes stable, okay? That is incredibly important because when soil and plants become stressed, right, they'll eat up the fresh soil organic matter, but they need additional stores in your soil, which is why you can't rebuild your soil structure in a year, right? You need to work on those stable stores of carbon in your soil. This is also going to be the key to hopefully getting growers and farmers access to soil carbon credits, right? So to be paid to make the soil healthier, to have carbon sequestered, will also cut back on your input costs, right? And hopefully make everything more profitable, which is ultimately the objective. Next slide. This is just a funny picture of sort of a priming meal. One of the things that we talk about is the effect of priming. When you have soil that can't sustain microbial life, right, and you throw down what would essentially be sort of an easy meal, right? The equivalent would be feeding you a bowl of cereal, right? You prime it, you can eat it right away, but the food is gone. So sometimes compost teas can have this effect, right? Compost teas will have sugars in it and microbes in it. You can put it down and it'll give you a burst of microbial activity, right? Because there's microbes with readily available food, but over time, those microbes won't have anything to eat in the existing soil and they will die. So when we talk about building soil organic matter, it's so that you have stores of food for those microbes in the plants. Next. Building a balanced microbial community. I wish I could tell you a super easy way to do it. I can't. I'm actually not an agronomist. We work on making the test, but we will say it depends a lot on your soil, climate, and your crop, okay? When we talk about healthy soil, the goal is to create optimal conditions for microbes to thrive in the soil. When your microbes are thriving, your plants do better both in terms of growth, immunity, and weed control. The microbial community can thrive and survive itself given the right food and environments, okay? Again, this is not a one size fit all. This is sort of where the till, no till debate comes in. It's not really meaningful at a high level, but at a field level, it might make a difference for you to decide, is tilling the right thing to do, selective tilling or no tilling? And feeding the microbes enable the microbial community to start rebuilding the cycle of healthy soil and a healthy symbiosis between plants and microbes. One of the most important things we talk about to keep microbes healthy is cover crops, right? Or to keep something growing on the soil all the time so that those plants and microbes can continue to feed each other, support each other, and grow. Okay, next. So this is just a discussion of sort of very high level about the different kinds of inputs there are. Chemical fertilizers, we all know about them, NPK. They're expensive, and because of the activities in Europe are getting even more expensive and perhaps even going to be quite difficult to get. So, and also the regulatory and public pressure on reducing chemical inputs and herbicides and pesticides is getting pretty strong. So for a lot of different reasons, we need to find solutions that are more cost effective and easier to do. Certainly chemical fertilizers are effective with judicial use. There's absolutely no debate on that. Microbial inputs is one other area that people are working on. The example would be mycorrhizal fungi, additive, compost teas. People have differing success with direct microbial inputs. I think I covered it before. If you put microbes down on soil that can't support microbial life, they will die, okay? So, you know, it's like taking people and throwing them in the desert and saying, good luck. They just can't do that. They need to have water and food and houses and things like that. So often that doesn't work. Sometimes it does. And the research is ongoing and unclear about how much microbial populations vary by location. The other thing we know is that microbes and bacteria and fungi are all over the place. We kind of want to say, like, It literally falls from the sky. There are microbes everywhere. You don't necessarily have to worry about putting them into the soil, although there certainly are times when it makes sense. But you do need to work on making the soil a good home for those microbes, okay? And the third category, and it uses different names, but we call them, for the most part, biostimulants like Rhyzogreen, right? These are inputs that create environments that microbes do better in, okay? So they work because they provide better conditions for microbes to grow. You need to make sure that they don't just give you a 2-week boost in microbes, but they help microbes build over time. And as the microbial population will grow, the plants will grow, and you'll have a community that is getting stronger, both in terms of above the ground and below the ground. So a product that perpetuates a system that reduces reliance on expensive chemical fertilizers, right? As the microbes grow and they can mine the phosphorus and the nitrogen that's naturally in the soil, and they can fix nitrogen from the environment and put it back into the soil, then you will have a much more profitable and healthy growth. Next slide. This is the other question we get a lot. What's the optimum microbial or fungal to bacteria level? And our answers to all these questions are, it depends. It's really, really hard to know. There are lots of different levels of microbial biomass and fungal to bacteria ratio for different kinds of soil. It depends on where you are. Different soils have different capacities. I live in the Pacific Northwest, okay? Even our most terrible soil here is teeming with life. We have a very temperate climate. We have a lot of organic biomass in the soil. And so that's naturally the case. If you live in the desert, right, it's going to be a little bit different. Even if you've done the most wonderful stewardship of your land, you're not probably going to get the same levels I get in my front yard. So the limits and the things that determine how high your microbial count can go is soil composition, the pH of the soil, both natural and created, so depending on what you've been doing to your soil, the compaction of your soil, again, some soil is more compact than others, and then we've also done things in the last hundreds of years to create different soil compactions. How many stores of soil organic carbon is in the soil, both naturally and created, temperature in the season, the salts and other chemicals that have been in the soil, either naturally or things that we've put down either on purpose or from residual industry, your crop history and your water availability. So the important thing when you think about microbes, and I know Trevor showed a bunch of numbers, is not necessarily the number, right? But it's the change in the number. Are you taking the dial and making your microbial population stronger and more diverse so that your plants can be healthier and mine naturally the chemicals in the soil and the air? Next. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about our company. We make the microbiometer. We did it so that farmers and growers can just go out in the field and test their microbial biomass in real time, over time, to sort of see what's happening and to assess products like Rhyzogreen and fertilizers to see what are they doing to my soil microbes, right? Once I understand how important it is for my crops to have a healthy soil microbiome, what are my practices doing to impact that? Am I making the situation better or worse? So that's just sort of why we're here and why we talk about soil all the time, because we get a lot of questions from people about interpreting their results. And that is it. I think I tried to go as quickly as I can through some of that. We have more content. You can do the next slide on our website and blogs and videos that actually are a lot more scientific based. But I didn't want to bog anyone down with tables and charts, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone would have, either here or offline.
There has been a couple questions come in, and I wanted to address them. One is when there's increased nutrient value in the plants, is it going to attract insects? And I'm going to throw that to Laura. I've just put my 2 cents in first. We have measured bricks on plants consistently, and we know BRIX, the higher the bricks, the more resilient that plant is against weed pressure, insect pressure, and disease pressure. That is not something we came up with. That is just one of the principles. In the healthier the animal or the human or the plant, the more resistant and resilient they are to different pressures. But I'd like to throw that to Laura.
I would say exactly the same thing. I mean, that's sort of funny to think that like a healthier, crop would be more, would taste better to the bugs. We do know that when you have healthier plants, particularly that are relying on microbes for their immunity, they are naturally more immune. But I don't have any direct science or done any studies for that. I just know that the people who studied it have got at least anecdotal and real evidence that that's the case.
We've done one study. I mean, we did it inadvertently in North Dakota, where there was a treated part of the field and a control, and the control had much worse grasshopper invasion versus the treated. So I believe it. The basics in terms of, we work in animal health, have done for 20 years. A healthy calf or a healthy child, they are naturally more resilient to the disease pressure and insect pressure, weed pressure.
And I will also say that the more plants, like people, are exposed to pathogens, the healthier their immune system is. So if you have a system that is sterile, then the plants don't have any natural immunity, and anything that comes by will be much more virulent than it would if, just like kids in daycare, right? They have higher immune systems.